Hello and welcome back to another episode of Psychology in Films. Today I'll be reviewing the new sci-fi disaster film Moonfall, starring Patrick Wilson and Halle Berry.
They found something on that day that they kept hidden for 50 years. And now, it's too late to stop.
If you're familiar with the disaster sci-fi genre and have enjoyed previous films of the same type, let's say for example Armageddon, starring Bruce Willis in the 90s, 2012 starring John Cusack, and the most recent disaster film San Andreas, starring the Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, then you might very much enjoy Moonfall. The plot surrounds a mysterious force that knocks the moon out of its orbits and sends it hurling into a collision course with Earth. And it's up to human scientists to find a solution to this problem and save the world.
In breaking news, the governor has just ordered the mass evacuation of the entire West Coast.
Moving to higher ground is the only possible chance of surviving.
Stay awake, my brothers and sisters! Stay awake!
Both Patrick Wilson and Halle Berry play the two scientists who have enough expertise to go into such a mission. They're also joined by a geeky guy who is a scientist wannabe, played by the actor John Bradley, whom we know from Game of Thrones. I thought he was really funny in Game of Thrones and such an interesting character, and here in Moonfall he plays again such a very memorable and a funny actor, and I thought he was one of the highlights of the film. The movie is your typical sci-fi big budget film, and to be honest, I thought the visual and special effects were quite impressive. They really focused on the wow factor and creating eye-popping visual effects that involves explosions and destruction. See, as the deviated moon is moving closer to Earth, it creates some tidal waves, which of course, it destructs cities and towns, and I thought they executed that to perfection in terms of visuals. There was also a lot of destruction in terms of parts of the moon as they hurl into Earth like meteors and really hit buildings and create destructions. I thought that was very impressive, and it involves a lot of fascinating visuals. The film also, before the destruction starts or before the moon deviates, they try to build up characters, and I thought it was quite typical and generic in terms of family dynamics. I mean, it involved a lot of broken families, ex-spouses, trying to deal with their issues, and of course after the disaster they come along together, and this had to be there to create some elements of drama, although it was a little bit exaggerated, and unfortunately it was predictable because again we've seen this so many times previously, and I think it's somewhat very similar to the family dynamics we saw in 2012. There were also a couple of action scenes involving car chases and other very thrilling and entertaining action scenes that would keep you on edge. I really thought that was intriguing and interesting and very visually pleasing. Having said that, if I go back to the plot, I thought the plot was rather fanciful, even maybe absurd. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, this type of genre has been exhausted, and so the writers were trying to think of something original and different, and that's why they involved the moon and its deviation and the mysterious force behind it. Now, I thought, again, I mean, yes, it's science fiction, and you have to suspend your disbelief to enjoy such a film, but as I was thinking, my God, they just went too far, and I thought it was, as I mentioned, absurd. It was even implausible, to be honest. But you know what? It made me think. I mean, is this movie more of a science fiction or a fantasy? And so it made me look up the difference between science fiction and fantasy. What is science fiction and what is fantasy? So when it comes to science fiction, it usually involves a dystopian society. often takes time in the future, and it involves elements of advanced technology. Fantasy, on the other hand, is involved more with mythical creatures and monsters and imaginative realities. I think science fiction is more plausible to some extent, something that could happen, but fantasy is really unreal, imaginative. For me personally, I think of fantasy something that involves magic, sorcerers and swords and knights and all that. I mean, think Game of Thrones, think Lord of the Rings. I feel these are TV shows or movies that involve fantasy. Funnily enough, people still debate whether or not the Star Wars films are whether they are fantasy or science fiction. That's a good question. What do you think?
Young Skywalker has become. There's been an awakening. Have you felt it?
I think it's more of a fantasy sci-fi. There's also, when I was looking it up in the internet, I found that a lot of people call certain genres space fantasy. So perhaps Star Wars could be fitting into a space fantasy. So that's regarding the science fiction and fantasy. So again, back to Moonfall. I mean, I think it's a space fantasy, I guess, but definitely it's stronger towards the sci-fi, science fiction genre. The performances. Now again, as I mentioned, this film relies much onto the visual effects and the special effects and the wow factor, so they don't focus much on acting and performances. However, they did assemble a very good cast. Patrick Wilson again and Halle Berry do a very decent job. Nothing mind-blowing, but decent enough. As mentioned again, John Bradley from Game of Thrones was quite an interesting character. I like the way he played his character. So nothing there to look for. I mean, and you wouldn't expect to look for something in the acting and performances. So in summary, if you're willing to suspend reality and escape into a sci-fi fantasy action thriller, then you will very, very much enjoy Moonfall. I think it is perfect as an escapism, and we have spoken about escapism in previous videos. Go ahead, it's highly recommended, and please try to watch it on the big screen in a movie theater or cinema, because these type of movies have to be watched in the big screen, because if you watch it on the TV or a smaller screen, I don't think you'll enjoy it as much, because again, it relies on the visual effects and you want to see them full force. That's it for today, and see you next time.